Hey, how's it going, guys? So you're probably looking at the speaker over here, and it is the KEF Q950s that I have in my home theater. For the past couple months, and even like the more recent weeks, I've been getting a lot of comments in our videos asking when the Q950 review is going to come out. And there's a reason why I delayed it for so long. To be honest, these are speakers that I like quite a bit, and I've owned for about 3 years now. And with my history of just going through gear, that's a rarity. Now, I wasn't always a speaker person. In fact, I was, really into headphones with being a university student. I didn't really, have a lot of experience with speakers. And how I met Jay is that I used to buy a lot of gear off Jay. And the cool thing about Jay is that he was into speakers and he always had something at his house. And eventually what happened is that he sat me down on a chair and he let me try hear his speakers. And the speakers that he had at that time were KEF LS50s. And essentially that incident, that small period of my life just shifted my entire direction of the hobby itself. I ended up selling my HD 800Ss for $1,500 and grabbing LS50s and going down that speaker path. And it eventually led me to these speakers in my home theater. Now, I was really impressed with the LS50s, to be honest, and Jay had the right equipment to make them sound really good. It only took me a week to realize that, hey, these didn't sound as good as Jay's. And what I found is that the back-end equipment that I was using it with, I don't even want to say it because it's very cringeworthy, but it was a Class D amp from Amazon, and it was definitely not doing it. So I wanted something more forgiving, easier to power, and affordable. So I came across Q150s, and they were really doing it for me for a bit. But having Q150s and knowing I wanted to do a home theater, I wanted to hear the Floorstander, the best of the Q line. And before I even had these KEFs in my home theater, I had Klipsch R26Fs, and they were okay for home theater, but for music, it was just not my cup of tea. And eventually I bit the bullet and I got these. Now, obviously, getting a speaker is one thing, but keeping it is another. And let's talk about the sound because that's what made me keep these speakers for such a long time. So the Q950s have a lot of things going for it. The actual driver layout is a 1.5-inch tweeter surrounded by an 8-inch mid-range woofer, a powered 8-inch bass driver with two passive bass drivers. And the speaker itself has no ports, it's sealed, so those passive bass drivers or radiators are really giving it some tight low end that the LS50s and Q150s lacked a lot. The only way to really come by that is adding a subwoofer, but I wanted something that could just, you plop it down, you give it some good amplification, and it will perform. And that's what these things do. Now, I'm a sucker for the coaxial design, and the reason why I chose it for a home theater is because of the wide sweet spot. Now, the reason of a home theater for me is I wanted that convenience. I wanted, the surround sound, but I also wanted a nice room where I can listen to music without really being so nitpicky. And with that large sweet spot, I don't have to exactly sit in the center of my couch. And if there's more than one person in the room that wants to listen to music, it can be done. And then in a movie, you're getting that large sweet spot and it just performs really well. So before we even, do all that, let's talk about the high frequencies. Let's talk about the tweeter and the mid-range, because with a coaxial design, the reason why they do that is so it comes from a single point source. And what that does is that, you get that large sweet spot, but what I found is that the imaging that I get from these speakers is really good. Now, there's better. And looking at the price, if you go up in the KEF line, it gets quite a bit better. And for someone who hasn't listened to speakers or, who's getting into the hobby, it was a very noticeable impression when I started pinpointing instruments when I was listening to music. I was rediscovering music with a KEF speaker. And with this speaker especially, because I had it in such a nice wide room and a nice, appropriate layout, I was really getting all the benefits of that imaging and the wide soundstage that these speakers are able to produce. So what else made me really like these speakers? Well, let's talk about the mid-range. And if you guys have ever heard of a KEF speaker, there's something that they do with the mid-range that you just like. It's so natural. It's very appealing, especially female vocals just sound like they're in the room. And with that mid-range, I never get any sibilance with the high frequencies or a tweeter. And the speaker overall is very forgiving compared to LS50. So even if I were to play some bad recorded tracks, or not even bad, modern music or electrically synthesized music necessarily doesn't have the best quality control. And a lot of modern music is made like that now. And with LS50s, it would be super transparent. You'd be hearing all the artifacts that may have not been, cleaned out of the track. And, if it wasn't naturally made, you're going to hear it, essentially, or if it wasn't well produced. And with the Q950, sure, you do hear some of the artifacts with bad recorded music, but it's a nice midway put. It's a nice entry gateway into an audiophile speaker. Although these are audiophile speakers, you're still able to listen to music that, isn't exactly audiophile. But really, when it comes down to speakers, it's the music that matters, right? So having something that can play a wide range of music was a huge perk for me. And with the tweeter not being super, it wasn't too bright, and my room itself being nice and acoustically damp, it was a nice combination. Now, powering the speaker is a Marantz MM725 with the preamp being my receiver, the SR7012. And what that gives is that gives it a bit of warmth to the speaker, which is something that I like. So finally, let's talk about the bass region, the bottom end, and why I like these floor standers and why I think they're a more complete speaker compared to the Q150s or the LS50s. Because those speakers, because of their coaxial design, if you play bass heavy tracks, the drivers will definitely bottom out, especially in a larger room. With this speaker, you get those two passive radiators that extend that bass response while also tightening it. Now this speaker goes down pretty easily down to 30 hertz. 20 hertz and under, it really starts sloping down. You don't really hear it. And that's a good thing. So you're getting most of the bass response, from 120 hertz down. But those final, 20 hertz and below, the bass that you do feel a little bit of bass, but it's it's not the same decibel level or pressure level as the rest of the frequency range. But that's a good thing. Because what I found is when I tried crossing over subwoofers with this speaker, you start hearing not only the room, but, random resonances in the room, like in your actual structure. And a speaker like this is made for people who are just getting into the hobby, to be honest. And unless you have a dedicated room where you do a double frame and you acoustically damp all your drywall and everything, this speaker will give you a really good experience without going super low and then hearing random resonance frequencies randomly when you're playing music. So I started appreciating that it rolls off at 30 hertz. Now, of course, I do have a subwoofer. When I first had these speakers, I had dual energy Veritas ported subs, but I eventually got an SVS PB13 beast of a subwoofer just for home theater performance. And I would never play that with music just because I don't want to hear my house shaking when I listen to music. Now, some of you guys like that, but for me, who I just want a nice natural presentation without anything being super bloated or, out of what the musician or the artist intended. So what are my final thoughts about this speaker? Is this my end game? No, it's not. It's a great start. I could settle with this. When I worked at a high-end audio show, I'd be hearing audio store, I'd be hearing so many good speakers. And they would be cost maybe triple, quadruple the price of these speakers. And I can't deny that they sound good. But when I come home and I sit on my couch and I just play these speakers, I feel really good because I felt like I got a really good bargain for the performance that these speakers do and the thought and the design that goes into this speaker. And I believe this is like the 11th edition of their UniQ drivers, and the chassis itself has been upgraded, so the actual mid-range and tweeter has its own separate box from the bass driver and then the passive radiators. And you know, it's such a well-polished speaker. I don't exactly agree with the vinyl finish. I'd want something, for my next speaker, I'd want something that's not vinyl, because I've seen the horrors of vinyl when, you know, a speaker falls over or it gets damaged. You're essentially going to have to rewrap the entire speaker. But for the price, that's just me being nitpicky. And I'm really happy with these speakers, but of course the audiophile journey is about compromises, and to be honest, I am looking to upgrade. And it all started when I went to an audio show, and instead of looking for a room because you're in a hotel, I started hearing rooms, and I followed my ears to the best, you know, sounding room, and I eventually found KEF R11s, and that just appealed to me. So secret's out, I'm gonna be upgrading to R11s. So when that happens, I'll definitely do a review of that. But yeah, I think these speakers are great for the price, and if you're in the same shoes that I was, you know, earlier on, try them out. And the best part about this speaker is that as you start, you know, prepping your room a bit better, adding a carpet, adding some acoustic treatment, they only start performing even better. So if you guys have any questions, leave it down in the comments below. I'll get right back to you, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.